And here's part two of our conversation with David from PE4Doers.
I have like 50 channels that I pay attention to quite often, and some of them are the high end tech YouTubers, Jay's 2 Cents and Bitwit and people like that.
Right.
Jay's 2 Cents is the one I like the most in terms of the higher end. Although sometimes he goes off the reservation a little bit too. I hope that's not politically incorrect. Once I got yelled at for using that term. Anyway, but I do like watching that and a couple of the others. I like what is this one? Paul's Hardware as well.
Okay.
That gets interesting. And just on pure video type stuff, I watch Gerald Undone. But anyway, I know there's one of them that you have to be 10,000 subscribers, and something else you need 30,000 subscribers for. I was trying to look it up the other day, and I couldn't easily find it.
Right.
But there are limits like that. You don't get all the features as a creator until you get apparently to 30,000 subscribers.
Right.
That's when you're making some money too. Generally, as long as people are watching your videos.
Right.
And you got to be careful. I personally spend a lot of time putting the commercials in the proper place.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't let the ones I don't let YouTube pick where that goes, because they always pick some like the middle of my sentence or something. Because I tend to have a lot of pauses in my voice, and they'll pick a pause in my voice and put a commercial in the middle of it. and so I always, before it even goes public, because I always schedule when mine go live, I always sit there and painstakingly pick. And I actually now put in actual 1-second titles so that I can stop at the 1-second titles, and that's where the commercials are going to hit.
Okay.
As best I can. I also put those in terms of chapters that appear that people can click directly on.
Right.
I think you made note of that before. I do that all the time now. And the advantage of that, as long as you named them properly, is it's possible that one of those could be picked up and put as a reference to a search in YouTube, or people have gotten Google connected that way. I am the primary one in Google for a couple of different videos that I did. But in fact, that lousy little case that I didn't like that my daughter bought, if you type in that case in Google, I have 2 of the 3 spots that they show.
Wow.
I think I said at one point I had all 3.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how I suddenly become like the expert on that case.
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do if you really want to get. I mean, right now I'm becoming the expert on these video capture cards. I mean, I'm not necessarily like that, but it's like the one for you type of thing. It's not the one for me. I'll do those. Matter of fact, I've been getting a lot of free video capture cards lately. I got another one that I'm just starting to work on the video for. This one's supposed to be a 3.0, USB 3.0. Oh, wow. And it also is a lot more expensive, this one. So I'm going to be very careful how I review it.
Right.
But I also got contacted from the company of this Nexigo, that little webcam that I did a video on, which is, it's one of my top ones right now. I guess they like the idea that their product is one of my top videos. So they want to talk about giving me other products, different models of different ones with different capabilities to review. And maybe even give me like, codes that I can give to the viewers to get a discount.
Sure.
That always interests people when you have something like that, right?
Absolutely.
You don't tell people the codes right away, though. You tell them the codes a little bit later into the video.
Right.
I'm sorry. That's a technique for those of you who are not creator-oriented. You got to get people to watch the videos.
Right.
And if they don't watch it, then we don't survive, because they pay you by how long people watch it.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to.
Well, I've seen a lot of people that, they'll just paste the codes right in the description, and it's like, no. Yeah, I understand making that easy, but at the same time, it's like they can just grab the code and go.
That's right. Well, that's
not watch the rest of the video.
Some of those you may do if it's an important one.
Right.
If it's an important one, you would do that. But if it's in general, you might want to think twice about doing that. I hate to say that, but I believe in full disclosure. I like being straight and honest with people. I always tell people when I'm reviewing a product that I was given for free to review, but I make it clear too that I'm still going to give an impartial review.
Right.
And I tell them that too. You be ready for the fact that it's going to be an impartial review. And so far they haven't had any issues with that. But I've heard stories though of others having issues with it.
Yeah.
So
well, I know I had a company approach me about wanting to sponsor, quote unquote, to have their product linked in the description of a video for a competing product.
Oh my goodness.
And I gave them a price, and apparently they didn't like the price I gave them, and I didn't hear back from them.
I would imagine, yeah.
And it's like at that point, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to nip this in the bud right now. And I put on my description, on the channel description, I said, this channel is primarily for Linux related things. And if your software does not run on Linux in addition or instead of Windows and Mac OS, save your time. and likewise for hardware, if it's not supported under Linux, officially or unofficially, I'm not really interested in reviewing it. And, I might be shooting myself in the foot for doing that, but I'm trying to, at some level, stay true to myself and to my vision for the channel, rather than, just become another one of these little annoying people. I think you probably know who I'm referring to.
Yeah, there's a couple of them, yeah.
Very arrogant, looks like a 20-something person, and
we talked about that last time, right?
Yes, I think so.
We'd rather not, it's probably best we don't name them.
Right. But yeah, I get the picture that he's in it for the money and nothing else. Yeah. And that's fine if it's working for him. More power. That's not who I am, and I'm too old to try to sell out and become that now.
Well, again, in my case, as I said, the reason I started this channel wasn't to make the money, but to create a legacy. Once I hit the age that my father was at when he passed away, that's a big awakening call.
Right.
It was like my father passed away young, relatively speaking, by today's standards. Maybe not when he passed away 30 years ago. But still, he was young. People don't generally pass away at that age today.
Sure.
He had some health issues, and he just didn't address them, to be honest with you. So, but that's beside itself. That's the reason that I started, along with my granddaughter being born. I suddenly realized that, even though I already had a grandson, but he was in North Carolina, I didn't get to interact with him and bond with him as much. Sure. I really feel, my wife feels even worse about that. But once you have one that you're seeing every day, and you're seeing grow and changing into a real, sophisticated human being, and asking tough questions and being able to pick up things I never thought a 1.5-year-old could pick up.
Right.
I never spent that much time, unfortunately, and I regret it, with my own children. I was busy trying to succeed in my career more than I am now. But now I'm able to pay more attention to that. And it was, I said, I could walk out the door, and even if I'm perfectly healthy, I could get hit by a car.
Yep.
Do I have anything to leave behind besides, some percentage of a house and whatever we happen to scrounge away, which is not a lot? What do I have? And I don't have a legacy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
So that was my motivation. It's nice to be able to make some money, but I'm not going to compromise my integrity over it.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen.
Absolutely.
Because when it comes, I believe that you have to answer. I'm not sure who to who. I think it's probably a blended thing from what everybody who considers themselves spiritually believe in. Mm-hmm. I think it's something more blended, because I don't, even though I was born under one particular or raised under one particular religion, I'm more broad than that.
Right.
But I do believe that, you have to be held accountable at some point. And when I have to stand in front of whoever it is and answer questions, I want to be able to say that above everything else, I had integrity. That's the most important thing to me.
Yep.
Now, I've violated my integrity like any human being does.
Sure.
Every time I've done that, though, I regret it. I still regret it. Those times still are burned in my mind, and I don't want to add to that list.
Right.
I just don't want to do it. Every one is like a notch in the gun type of thing, you know. I don't want to deal with that. So that's what's most important, you know. But, you know, I would like to be able to, if this worked out, to be able to retire a little bit earlier.
Sure.
And I would have. That would be nice, because I don't necessarily deal, I hope they're not listening to this one, I don't necessarily deal with as many high integrity people as I'd like to.
Sure.
There are some, absolutely some, that I think are as, you know, as high as I am. Not to make myself special, but, you know, the people that I know that are of higher integrity to myself are not people that I work with. Just the way it works out in this particular job. But that's true about any career, right? You're dealing with competition a little bit. You're dealing with a lot of things, right, at work. But, you know, the people that have the most integrity are the, you know, my wife, my best friend, people like that. And I don't want to, I could never approach them in terms of integrity. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to knock myself down any further.
Right.
That's important to me. Which also reminds me of that FBI story. I don't know if we still want to hear that or not.
Yeah. Do we have time?
Yeah, it'd probably take about 10 minutes to explain it if you want.
All right.
It's an interesting story. It's actually pretty interesting. It started when I got my first master's degree in computer science. And like any other time when you get a new degree, you go and check out the field. What's out there? How can I get maybe a different career, a different job, whatever it is? And I started sending letters to all types of things. The internet wasn't that big then. In fact, almost non-existent. Only universities and the military and certain government units actually had access to it at that time. And so I went ahead and just started going through literature that I had access to on the types of companies that might be hiring. And lo and behold, one of them showed up to be the FBI. Now, they listed two different types of jobs, though. They listed because I looked, obviously, who would be interested. People with an advanced graduate school degree is what I was looking for. And they had two different types there. They had, well, of course, you could be an agent, or you could go into one of their research or back office analysis groups. Now, I figured I knew computers as well as anybody at that point, just graduated my computer science master's degree. That was also my hobby. I mean, it was everything that I did. And so I said, well, they might be able to use me, for something like that. So I sent a letter to the Long Island office, which is, not too far from where I lived at the time. Long Island, New York, which is still where I live, but in a different spot now. And lo and behold, I get a call from somebody at the FBI. And this woman, she identified herself as a special agent. And she said, we got your letter, you're interested in applying to the FBI. She goes, but I don't quite understand what you're saying in this about the type of work you're looking for. And so I went and explained it to her. I'm looking for more of a back office thing. I know computers. I know computer security. I didn't know it well then as well as I do now, but I knew it very well. And so I think maybe you guys could use me, doing some research for you or whatever. And she goes, well, maybe our Washington, D.C. office might need you if you wanted to do that kind of work. Do you want to move to try to apply, maybe move to Washington, D.C.? I said, no, not likely. I've been to Washington many times. That's not my cup of tea. She goes, okay, well, the only thing we could offer you here in the New York area, which includes Long Island and Manhattan as well, is if you wanted to be an agent. And I said, I don't think I would qualify to be an agent. And so she started asking me some questions, about my age and about my background, how long was I a citizen? I said, since I was born, and things like that. And she goes, you would qualify well as an agent at the end of that. If you wanted to apply, I could send you the application, right? And you could take a look at it. You don't have to apply. So I said, sure, mail it to me. And she sent me the application. I filled it out. The long and short of it was I had to show up for a written test, right? The next step. And apparently, I didn't realize at the time that was selective on who they picked to show for the written test. Not everybody got that chance. They started off with this massive list of people, and they constantly cut it down. So I went and took the test, and it was mostly a test. They asked like questions, the same thing over and over again, like 3 different ways they asked you whether you would ever park in a handicapped parking spot. You know, they described it under different situations. Like, you got to get in there because you got a bad headache and it's a drugstore and you got to get some medicine. Would you consider parking in the handicapped spot for just 3 minutes? No, come on. You know, you don't do that. You know, not for a headache. It would have to be like a life and death situation, right? In my mind. And they asked you different ways. They were looking for integrity is what they were looking for. And they were looking for knowledge in science, a lot of science-related questions. I was really surprised at that. And apparently I did well because I got called for the next step. And the next step was one that really surprised me because you show up to the offices in Manhattan is where you had to go. Matter of fact, the written test was there too. The main FBI headquarters in New York City in Manhattan. And they said, okay, they had us all in the big room. There was probably about 400 of us there. And it's one of the guys up there, he was a special agent in charge. He was the equivalent of a supervisory agent, right? Mm-hmm. And he said, matter of fact, I think he was an he was an assistant special agent in charge. You know, so it's like a director guy, right? And he said, well, consider yourselves lucky you got this far. We started out with a pool, as you all know, when you first submitted your applications about 4 months ago. That was over 1,000 people just in the New York area. And a lot of you are not from the New York area. We also included in this meeting here people from the southern New Jersey area and the people from upstate New York and some people from Pennsylvania and Connecticut as well. So this is more like a regional thing. Sure. Out of the region, you know, there was about 3,000 people who applied. And only the 400 of you made it through the first 2 cuts. So today we're going to have 2 more things to do. Okay? And then we're going to have cuts after each of those things. So in the morning, we're going to do one. It was an all-day thing. We're going to do one. And then you're going to see after lunch, some people are not going to be back. And then in the afternoon, we're going to have another one. And only those people who make it through the afternoon one will be invited to the next step. And he goes, the next step will be a medical exam, a medical and physical exam, which means we're going to test to see how physically fit you are. So it's not just medical, but it's going to be another all-day thing, and you're going to have to come in and do this. Now, I had gone to the Air Force Academy, as I think I said last time. Mm-hmm. So I had been through the similar type of thing for the Air Force Academy. So the medical and the physical part didn't bother me. I was still in good shape. But the interesting one was the morning. They brought us individually into a room. I think there might have been 2 or 3 at a time, but, you know, you had to go into a room with just you and an agent. And we went into this room outside the main conference room. And I went in there, and there was this woman who was an agent, but she probably had about 15 or so years in. She wasn't young necessarily. She was, you know, she'd been there a while. And she goes, okay, there was a .357 Magnum on the table. And I recognized it right away. That was a real gun because I'd been exposed to that when I was in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's not a 38. I could tell by the size of the cylinder. It was much longer than a 38. That was a .357 Magnum, which was their standard carry firearm at the time. And so she goes, okay, I'd like you to pick up that revolver and then point it at that wall. And I'm going to tell you what to do after that. So when I picked it up, by habit, because when I was in the Air Force, they teach you take it. I opened up the cylinder and made sure it was unloaded. She didn't tell me to do that, but I did that anyway to make sure it was unloaded. She goes, "Oh, that's really good. You get a plus for that one." And she did something in the book she had in front of her. And so I had to point it up. I said, one-handed or two? She goes, whatever you feel comfortable at. So I just did one-handed. And she goes, when I say go, I want you to start pulling the trigger as rapidly as you can while keeping it pointed at that wall. And I'll tell you when to stop. So I start, and I figured she was counting, right? So I counted, and I was counting. I wasn't sure how long it was, though. A couple of minutes, maybe 3 minutes, I'm not sure. And I start pulling the trigger when she said go. Click, 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 as quickly as I could. And I was counting as I was going, and I got up to 204. And she goes, okay, stop. So I stopped. She writes something in the book. I said, so how many did I have to get? And she goes, you needed 100 in the 2 minutes that I timed you for. And you more than succeeded that. And I even asked her, why are you guys doing that? She goes, why don't you ask that question in the main room when you get back out there? Because other people might be interested in that question. So when they open up for questions right after you get back there and everybody's back in the room, they're going to debrief you, and then they're going to ask if there's any questions. You go ahead, ask that question. I think you should. And so when I did that, everybody was back to the room. I asked a question. I think mine was the first or second question. And they said, well, we've had a problem with people going through the FBI Academy, that they were unable to have the strength in their hands, and in particular their trigger finger, to pull a revolver enough to get through a full day at the range. Because when we do it, you're at the range a full day, probably shooting at least 1,500 rounds.
Wow.
And there are people who can't get through that, even with breaks. Their hand just stops stop functioning. So we need to detect that early. So then he says, okay, well, let's take a break. So you got now 15 minutes. You can't leave the building, but go stretch. There's a cafeteria over there. There's vending machines. Do that. Now, I saw when we were in the break, they were calling people out of the room. They didn't come back. And when we came back from the break, there were only half the people there.
Wow.
So they cut us in half during the break. And I guess that was anybody who didn't pass the trigger pull test. So that was the first shock that got me. The second shock, and then I got past the medical, and I got past the physical easily. The last step that I had to do was to go for a personal interview. And I went to Manhattan again, and there were 3 agents this time. I was greeted at the elevator by a male agent who happened to say, I noticed your record. You went to the Air Force Academy. He goes, I'm a Naval Academy graduate. So, you know, we had some camaraderie right there. He was a nice guy. He was an easygoing guy. He brought me into the interview room, and there were 2 women agents there. I don't think the gender really mattered. But the interview did not go well, primarily because I asked questions. I found this out later. I got a letter in the mail. I guess they have some magic with the post office or something. I got a letter in the mail the next morning saying that I didn't pass the interview and that I could try again in 1 year if I wanted to. I never did. But I asked questions like, I was a computer person, so I had studied, and they had 56 field offices. I asked a question like, can you tell me what is your form of network that you have connecting your 56 field offices? And the 2 of the agents there, I won't say which 2, they did not know what I was talking about. And then the third one said, oh, that's a computer network that allows you to transfer data quickly between, office buildings and cities and everything. And the other, oh, really? We don't have anything like that. I said, well, then how would you communicate case information that traverse multiple field offices? And that person goes, we usually just send faxes or overnight mail. And I said, really? And it was like, I must have done that sort of expression just like that. Really? Like 2 or 3 times and their answers to my questions. And there was similar type questions like that. I was trying to think of the other one. They asked me, this one, I probably shouldn't have done this. They asked me a hypothetical scenario. They said, let's say it's your first day. You're assigned to a field office. You're out of the academy, right? What do you think your first day is going to be like? Now, I had already read this in the studying that I did. I said, I believe I might be assigned to a more senior agent, experienced one, and would be asked to, work with that agent, until, I got used to the way things worked around here. Right? And they said, oh, okay. Now, suppose you're together and you're driving the car, which you would be if you're the junior person, right? and you happen to be assigned to, we don't really have patrol duty, but we have field duty, where we basically just stay in the car all day. You don't have to do that every day, but we take turns rotating teams, the partner teams out there to do that. So we always have somebody that's out there that could respond a little bit more quickly. So let's say it's your day and you and your partner are out there, and suddenly a call comes in and says bank robbery in progress. Would that be one that you'd have to listen to? And I said, of course. Banks are federally insured, therefore they're under the jurisdiction of the FBI. I said, okay, that's good too, she goes. So then, so now you go to the bank and you pull into the side, trying to avoid any observance from anybody that's inside. Okay? And the patrol, the regular local police have been notified. I said, yeah, and we're not supposed to really do anything until they get notified. And the person goes, that's absolutely right. And then said, what do you think you'd wind up doing next? So I said, well, I don't think I'd be running into the bank and raising my badge and saying FBI. I was actually looking for a laugh. Only the one laughed, the one that I had established that relationship with at the elevator. The other two did not. And you could tell between that and the questions that I asked, it was not going well. And I got the letter the next day. So anyway, that's my FBI story. I don't know if that's interesting or not. When I was a regional manager in consulting, I had one of the guys that worked for me apply to the FBI. And he decided he was interested in it. Now they had a cybersecurity group. This is many years later, 15, 16 years later.
Sure.
And so he was interested and he was one of my white hat hacker guys. He wasn't the best I had. So I was wondering if he would make it, but he did. But I remember when he went to the interview, because you have to inform your employer when you're applying to the FBI. They actually sent 2 agents to the office. They set an appointment with me. They wanted to talk about this guy. They wanted to see all his performance review. They even had the release, and I remember signing that release too. I didn't know they sent agents to my job though. My boss never told me about it. But they sent 2 agents, and he said, I need all of the performance reviews that you have ever done for this individual, and preferably all performance reviews while working for this company. I said, well, he's been working here about 4 years. He said, do you have access to all the performance reviews? I said, I do. He goes, okay, we'd like to see all 4 of them. And then we want to ask you questions because, he's been reporting to you, right? I said, yeah. I mean, he initially was reporting directly to me, and now I have him reporting to a project manager, but, I keep track of everybody that works in my group. And they asked a lot of detailed questions, and it was not security related stuff. Apparently they already done their security clearance on the guy. They just wanted to know what kind of worker he was. And he made it into the FBI. Now he's one of those assistant special agents in charge in the New York office. Wow. But the real thing that bothered me is he came and had lunch with us after he was in the FBI for about a year, and with the old team that we had because that was in Parsippany, New Jersey, which was the office that I ran. And we had brought him out to lunch, and we were like, and he had to pay for his own lunch, of course, that's the rule. But, he joined us. And then, so I said, what did they got you doing? Unless it's secret or anything, because it's not secret. He goes, I'm one of the 2 agents that's keeping an eye on the Russian embassy. I said, what? Is there cybersecurity people in the New York office? He goes, yes, but they didn't assign me to that team. I said, why wouldn't they do that? And he didn't answer. He just shrugged his shoulders, like he couldn't believe that they had him being one of the ones to watch the Russian embassy. I said, so you sit out there in a car? He goes, I really can't tell you the details, but just watching people come and go from the Russian embassy. Can you believe that? Now this is almost 20 years ago now.
Wow.
So things have changed now, I would hope.
I guess the only quick thing I wanted to bring up was, have you heard that AMD is buying Xilinx?
I have heard that, but I'm not familiar with the intricacies of that relationship. Maybe you could,
I haven't heard much about it myself, but I know through our conversations and a little bit of research on my own, Xilinx makes FPGAs.
Yeah, they're probably trying to compete with Intel on that then.
Right. I think that's partially the case, but I know one article I looked at had suggested, and I don't know how much verified information, this could have been completely speculation on the part of the article, but they had suggested in this article that AMD might be acquiring Xilinx in part to start working on more smart network cards. So like there is a network card. It was marketed as a gaming card, and it had an FPGA on board to help speed up network communication. So, they were speculating at least that could be part of the reason they were doing that, and then of course to compete with Intel in other areas. I found it kind of fascinating that they were spending that kind of money. I think it was like $30 million they spent on that company.
Right.
And it should be interesting to see how that plays out. It sounds like the acquisition won't be complete until towards the end of 2021. But pending all the governmental approvals and things. But it should be interesting to see what they do with it. And, I know that AMD for a while there was working on an ARM processor of their own.
Yep.
And so, who knows? Maybe we'll see some of that come back to light and, integrated into new products.
Yeah, what I was looking for here, sorry to be looking while I was talking, but I was looking back at this. I was trying to find the name of the company that Intel bought.
Okay.
That basically, that's how they got the FPGA fabric into their business. It started with an A. I just can't think of the name right now. But a lot of the initial training, that company still existed, even though they were considered a subsidiary of Intel for a long time. It had been an independent company before they got bought.
Right.
And when I did all the training, because they have free online training for that, for a lot of things, how to create Verilog, how to do all of that stuff. That's how I did a lot of learning. It's pretty good. It's not just slide presentations either. It's real training.
Right.
And it was all free. And I sat through a lot of those courses, many hours of it, in learning how to use that. And it was all done by that company.
Okay.
Before Intel finally dissolved their name.
Right.
I just can't think of what it is right now. If I remember, I'll try to, send you an email or something and let you know.
Sure.
But it's the same kind of thing.
Right.
It's the same kind of thing. That's why I was interested in trying to figure out what that was.
Yeah, it seems like at the time that acquisition happened, I saw it in the tech news that I follow. So, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the company myself. So
yeah, it starts with an A. That's all I remember.
Yeah,
Altera.
Okay. Yep.
Altera. That's what it was. Which doesn't exist anymore. They were originally their own company. They got bought out by Intel, and they kept the name for a long time.
Right.
And then they dissolved it. They got blended in.
Yeah.
They became part of the collective.
Right. You will be assimilated.
With Star Trek: The Next Generation. I use that a lot when you see things going on at the corporate level, that especially the organization I work for.
Right.
But, if you don't get assimilated, you're not going to move up in management.
I know there were a lot of memes in the early 2000s that showed Bill Gates as the Borg. So when all the lawsuits, the antitrust lawsuits were still going on, late 90s, early 2000s. I have more respect for Bill Gates now than I did then. But that's a whole other conversation.
I was once mistaken for Bill Gates.
Really?
He's not that much different in age from me, to be honest with you.
Right.
And it was in Singapore. I was with when I was a consultant, security consultant, I went to Singapore, a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson that did research there for Johnson & Johnson in certain medicines. And we had to go there and do a security review, a computer security review. And I was the technical arm of the internal audit group. So I went there with 3 of the internal auditors from Johnson & Johnson. And when we walked in, and we were all gathering at a table, and they didn't have a lot of conference rooms. So they just gave us a section of this massive shared area where they gave us some tables to sit in the open. And I was wondering why I kept seeing people like coming in and looking around cubicles at us and stuff. I figured they just figured we were auditors, right? Well, later on, when we were at lunch, some of the same people that I saw joined us for lunch, because they had a large lunch for the employees that day.
Sure.
And they might have just done it because we were there, to get to know what we were doing, right? And so I remember I saw one of them, and they spoke English extremely well. That's in Singapore. English is their language of administration. All the signs are in English, and then right below that, depending on the neighborhood in Singapore, because it's an island about the size of Puerto Rico. So depending on which one of the sections of Singapore you're in, it's either, and 70% of it's Chinese origin, the citizens of Singapore. But there's like 20% Indian and 10% Malaysian. And there's different neighborhoods on the island for each of those. And then you'd see the right underneath the English, you'd see a local language.
Sure.
Right. So anyway, I just asked. I saw one of the guys that had been peeking around the corner. He did it more than once. I said, "Can you answer a question for me?" He goes, "I hope so." He says, and they seemed nervous. And I said, "I noticed that when we were sitting over here, I saw you kept looking around the corner at us. Was there anything in particular what you were looking for?" He goes, and he suddenly turns to the others, and he didn't know what to say. I caught him, which I tend to do to people. And he goes, "Well, don't take this wrong, but when you first arrived, a lot of people here thought you were Bill Gates." I had a similar haircut. I had similar glasses at the time.
Oh, wow.
And they thought I was Bill Gates. I couldn't believe it. I said, and I just made a comment. I just laughed, and I said, "Boy, I wish I had 1% of what he's worth."
Right.
And he was not worth as much then, but he was worth a lot still.
Yeah.
It was like unbelievable. And I could tell you a whole story on that one, by the way, in terms of my interface with Microsoft. In terms of I could have bought stock with them when they were 30 people.
Wow.
I was offered penny stock, but I had to buy $1,000 worth of it because I was one of their few customers. I bought Microsoft Basic for my H8, my Heathkit computer, from them. They are the only ones that had a full feature extended Basic for the H8. And it didn't cost that much. I think I paid like $15 for it. It was a lot of money at the time, probably like $100 now.
Sure.
But still, because I was a customer and I registered it, because in case I ran into a problem, I wanted to make sure I got support.
Right.
They sent me this offering. Right. And they said I was one of 1,000 people given this offering. And I had to buy a minimum of 1,000 shares of the stock, and it would have, it was 10,000 shares at 10 cents a share. Right. Now we're talking about here 1978.
Wow.
And while we were doing a job for Microsoft in Seattle one time, in Redmond, Washington, I happened to ask the guy from Microsoft who had hired us. I was working for then Coopers & Lybrand, one of the entities that later became PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Sure.
And I told him about this. He says, "What year was that?" And I said, "It was right around 1978. And he actually went onto his computer and looked it up. He goes, "Oh, there was only one offering between 1977 and 1979 for that." And you're right, it was 1,000. Only 1,000 people got that offered, and they only had available the equivalent of. It looks like you could have done up to 5,000 share, up to $5,000 if you wanted to. I said, "Yeah," they said it. I could get up to 5,000, but you didn't get any. I said, "No." They said, well, if you had gotten 1,000 shares, you don't want to know what you'd have now. If you had gotten 10,000 shares, which is $1,000. And I said, come on, I got to know now. And he goes, it would be worth today, assuming you still had it, $43 million.
Oh my gosh.
I thought I was going to get sick right there on the conference room table. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I had the money then too.
Oh, wow.
I actually was thinking about it. They sent me a picture with the offering of the whole Microsoft team. Bill Gates he didn't even get a seat or stand in the back. He was down on his one knee in front, below the people who were sitting. Because he was just a developer then.
Wow.
Talk about things that could make you sick.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
That would do it.
And by the way, that particular event took place 20 years ago.
Wow.
So if I had kept it beyond that, where do you think I'm at now? I'm on a beach, maybe owning the island that the beach is on.
Right. Yeah.
Anything like that ever happened to you?
Unfortunately, no.
Well, you don't want it to happen to you because I did not feel good after that.
Well, but it's a great story to tell. It's a great story to tell.
It's a sickening. When I think about it, it just, and you know, when I got home from that trip, I had only been married probably a couple of years at that point.
You didn't tell your wife, did you?
It took me a day before I got up the courage to tell her that. It took me a day, but she didn't know me back then. You know, we may not have met if I had that kind of money, right?
Right.
You know, she may not have known. So it's like anything else. I guess things work out for the best, right?
Yeah. Well,
still, I should have that. I should have those millions. Oh,
yeah.
Oh my God.
I would be happy with a fraction of a percentage of the money that Bill Gates has given away.
Yeah.
through his philanthropy, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't had any such opportunities present themselves.
Well, you know, it's like anything else. You're around long enough, you know, things like that happen, right? And I was in a job where I traveled all around the world. You know, I got to see places that people will never see. That's something I do have, right?
Absolutely.
And it's very interesting when you start looking at things that way and you realize different cultures. I mean, some of the stories I could tell about the different countries I went to, some of them are pretty amazing in themselves. You know, the experience in Japan, for example, where I got lost. I stayed late in the office. We had an office. I worked for a different company then. And I stayed late at the actual office, and everybody else that was in my group, and there was like 7 of us, they went back to the hotel. And then so I had to walk, and it was already dusk out when I was trying to walk to find a hotel, and I had no idea where it was at. And forget about reading. The signs don't have English on them. So I saw this elderly couple, and I said, I tried to talk to them in English. They had no idea what I was. But then I remember what somebody had told me, that even though in Japan they probably changed now because that was a while ago, even though they don't talk English much, they all understand written English. So I took up my computer case, took out a piece of paper, and wrote down my question: where to find that particular hotel. And then the 2 of them go, and they're talking in Japanese. Oh, and then he writes down in English which way I have to go. Right? He even put the symbols, the same that matches the signs on the street for me. So I was able to find the hotel because of that little thing, you know. And it was just in the back of my mind, somebody mentioned that.
Right.
Because they're so used with the technology, they're so used to communicating with people in English over email and stuff, that was the way to do it. Now, it's probably, again, that was probably about, at this point, probably 17 years ago. So I'm sure things have changed a little bit. But right around the same time, I also went to Beijing, China.
Wow.
And Beijing, China, everybody there talked English. Very few didn't. Very few didn't. And I even got stopped again. I happened to be out. We went out for lunch, and I decided to go and take a different path. This time I knew how to get back where I had to go. So I took a different path because I saw like this park there. And suddenly I had this woman. She had 2 children with her, a little boy and a little girl. They were about like, I think the boy was like 9 or 10. The little girl was a couple of years younger. And she stopped me in the street. She was probably in her late 30s. And she goes, "Excuse me, sir," perfect English, really, and said, "Could you do me a favor?" And I was trying to figure out what could she want, right? And then she goes, "My children, they don't get a lot of chance to speak English. Could you talk English to them a little bit? Apparently my English they don't like my English." I said, she had an accent, of course, but it was good English. But she wanted them to talk to somebody, I guess, without an accent. So I started talking to them, and they talked back in English. And I was asking them about sports. What kind of sports do they have here? Which ones do you like? And then they asked me, "What about you? Which sports do you like in the United States?" And we talked for about 10 minutes. I wasn't in any rush to get back. And I just stood there in front of their mother and talked to the 2 children in English. So it's that's something you always remember. I wonder how many people she might have approached that told her, forget it. Or like they don't have time, or they're in a rush, or whatever.
Or how many people she told that she just met Bill Gates.
That's right. Well, that was Beijing, China now, so I don't know if she thought that. Also, I had changed my hairstyle by then. It was a different company, so. I look back at some of those pictures, and I guess I did resemble him a little bit just by the way I had my hair cut and the glasses that I had.
Sure.
I think I didn't think about it at the time, but they're right. Anyway, that's all I had, unless you wanted to bring up anything else.
No, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. So,
thank you.
If you haven't been to David's channel yet, I've got the name scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Please check it out. I find his videos to be very complimentary to the ones I do here on the Practical IT channel, and you might find something of interest there yourself. So,
and again, my theory is anything computer based. That's the idea. So it could be anything, an embedded computer, whatever.
Right on. So that should bring us to the end. And, of course, everybody, if you haven't done so already, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and jump over to David's channel and do the same thing.
Thank you.
We're both on the trajectory to hit 2,000 subscribers, hopefully by the end of the year. And so, yeah, that would be of great help to both of us to meet that goal. Any parting thoughts before we go for the night?
No, not other than thanks again for taking the time to talk. I know I wind up talking a little bit too much sometimes. I can be, it's called running with the mouth, and I tend to do that sometimes. But hopefully I didn't take too many tangents. I know I always do that as well.
No, it's quite all right. I always find it more interesting to listen to other people's stories and listen to myself talk anyways. So
so the next time we'll do it together on and that will appear on my channel. And then,
absolutely. So be on the lookout for those. And with that, have a good night. We'll close out, and I will see everybody in the next video.
Take care, everybody. Take care.